It's crazy how one single moment can just completely rewrite a person's life. It can shatter the path you're on and forge an entirely new one forever. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful transformations in history, a story of how an ordinary man was completely remade by an extraordinary encounter.
So that leads us to the big question, right? How does a mountain forge a leader? That's the core question we're tackling today. We're going to unravel how this single, dramatic encounter didn't just change a man, it literally created a prophet and set an entire nation's destiny in motion.
All right, so to really get our heads around that, we need to break it down. We're going to look at the anatomy of this transformation. We'll explore three connected pieces: that profound spiritual shift that kicked it all off, how that shift completely redefined his leadership, and finally, how it forged a brand new identity from the ashes of his old one.
But hey, to really get the impact of the after, you've got to know the before. I mean, who was Moses leading up to this moment? He wasn't some great leader or a prophet, not at all. He was a fugitive, living in exile, working as a simple shepherd. His life was quiet, anonymous, really as far from destiny as you could possibly get.
Okay, so the first piece of this puzzle is a massive spiritual shift. This wasn't just about, strengthening a belief he already had. This was the creation of a divine covenant, a binding, formal agreement that would become the bedrock for everything that came next.
And this brings us to a really key idea here, the divine mandate. And look, this wasn't a suggestion, it wasn't friendly advice, it was an authoritative command. Moses was basically commissioned, deputized, you could say, to act as an agent for a divine source. This gave him not just a message, but a mission with absolute, unquestionable authority. And the result of that? Well, his purpose was no longer his own. I mean, just think about that for a second. His entire focus, his whole reason for being, pivoted from just surviving in exile to serving a mission that was infinitely greater than himself. His old life? It was over.
So you have this huge spiritual shift, right? And that directly fuels the next part of his transformation, a total redefinition of leadership. Because let's be honest, the skills you need to guide a flock of sheep are, well, they're worlds away from what you need to guide an entire nation. I mean, just look at the scale of this change. It is staggering. He goes from a simple shepherd to a lawgiver and a liberator. His scope goes from a small flock of animals to an entire nation of people. And his responsibility, it shifts from just basic animal welfare to the national destiny of his people. This isn't just a promotion, it's a complete reinvention of his place in the world. And with this brand new leadership role came a whole new job description, basically. First, he had to be the one to receive the divine vision. Then he had to somehow translate and transmit that vision into a foundational law for everyone else. And finally, he had to guide the people on their journey based on that very law. You see how each step flows directly from the authority he got on that mountain? And all of this, the new mission, the new leadership role, it leads to the final and maybe the most important piece of the puzzle, his identity. This is where all those external changes become deeply internal. This is the point where the man becomes the mission. So it starts with the man, just a person, right? With a past, with flaws, with doubts, living a quiet life that he probably thought he had all figured out. And then he shifts. He becomes a messenger. His main identity is now tied to his function. He is the conduit, the one who carries the word, the law, the vision, from a divine source to the people. And finally, he transcends even that. He becomes a symbol. He's no longer just the guy who delivered the message. He becomes the living, breathing embodiment of the law and the covenant itself. His personal identity is completely and permanently fused with his public and historical one. Okay, so why are we talking about this? Why does this ancient story still matter to us today? Because it gives us a timeless blueprint for transformation. It reveals a pattern for how profound change happens that echoes through all of our lives, whether we realize it or not. Well, because what you're looking at is basically a blueprint for profound change. First, you have a defining encounter that just shatters the way things are, that leads to a new external mission that pulls you forward. To meet that mission, you have to go through a fundamental internal identity shift. And finally, the whole thing hinges on accepting immense new responsibility. This isn't just an ancient story. It's a pattern we see in leaders, innovators, and artists all throughout history.
And I love this thought because it just brings everything into focus. The experience on the mountaintop, that's incredible, sure, but it's ultimately meaningless if you can't bring that vision, that clarity, back down into the messy reality of the world, into the valley below. The real test is in the application. And that really brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the mountains in our own lives? What are those defining moments, those challenges or revelations that have forged our purpose and shaped who we are today? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us.